The stars wheeled around them, a blur of motion as Simon twisted the Stardust Drifter in evasive spirals that strained its aging frame. Red lights pulsed across the control panel, warning him of overheating coils and stress fractures. But he couldn't ease up. Yelena crouched beside his chair, one hand braced on the floor, the other gripping the side of his seat. Her wide eyes never left the forward screen as the enemy ship loomed, closing the distance with each breath. "We can't outrun them," he muttered through clenched teeth, flipping open a secondary interface. "So we vanish." He pulled up the star chart and locked in the coordinates for a dead patch of space, a narrow gravitational rift at the edge of the Serpent's Nebula. No sane pilot went there, which was precisely the point. Yelena didn't speak, but she pressed her clawed fingers gently to his arm, not pulling him, not directing him, just anchoring him, as if to say, "I trust you." "Hold on," he said, and slammed the throttle. The ship screamed, not in the mechanical sense though. The hull groaned, and the power core shrieked, but something deeper, something primal, like the Stardust Drifter itself feared what lay ahead. A moment later, they breached the rift. Gravity fractured. The stars outside bent into impossible spirals. Time stuttered. Every sensor went dead. Inside the cockpit, only breath and instinct remained. The ship bucked like a beast. Simon gripped the yoke with all of his strength. Yelena didn't cry out, didn't flinch. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her fur brushing his cheek. Her heartbeat loud in the silence. Then darkness. Total. And then her stillness. The screens flickered back to life. The threat was gone. Xenocorp hadn't followed. They wouldn't. No tracker worked in the rift. No weapon systems functioned correctly. And very few survived entry. Simon let out a ragged exhale and slumped back. Yelena didn't move away. She remained beside him, one hand still on his arm. When he turned to look at her, she looked back. She opened her mouth, struggled for words, then gave up and instead nuzzled against him, lightly, a gesture soft as breath, wild as instinct, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. "I'm no hero," he whispered. She only blinked, then gently touched her forehead to his dot, and in that quiet gesture, she said everything. The air inside the ruined orbital station tasted of metal and forgotten screams. Naren stepped lightly over a shattered containment gate, boots crunching on glass and cracked polymer, the long beam of his headlamp sweeping the darkness like a blade. His ship, the Wayfarer's Spite, was docked in the outer ring, tethered to the derelict by a manual lock, because the auto-docking systems had long since gone dark. He hadn't come here for trouble, only scrap. High-value tech, core regulators, power cells. Even a salvaged memory node or two from the research archives would net him good credit back in the black markets of Kessel Drift. But what he found wasn't on any manifest. It started with a hiss, soft, rhythmic, not mechanical. Breathing. He stopped beside a corridor junction. The emergency lighting flickered, long dead, but flickering anyway, and he could swear the shadows themselves recoiled. His fingers hovered near the hilt of his stun blade, but he didn't draw yet. Then he heard it again. Not a machine, not a failing coolant fan, but soft, raspy exhale just behind the biolab vault door. He crept closer. The security panel blinked red. Locked. So he hacked it. A minute later, the bolts disengaged with a shudder. The door slid open halfway before groaning to a stop, just enough room for him to squeeze through. And there, curled inside the chamber like a discarded memory, was her. She wasn't strapped down like the others he'd seen in stasis tanks before. No wires, no monitors, just thick containment cuffs around her ankles and wrists, anchored to the base of a cryo bed. She was breathing shallowly. Her skin was pale but tinged with something not quite human, a shimmer of patterned fur that faded into the angles of her arms. Her ears pointed, her hair white. Her eyes, though closed, twitched as if sensing him already. "What in all the stars?" Naren whispered. The file lying on the ground nearby bore one word burned into its metal cover. Salehi picked it up. It had been half destroyed. Only fragments of text remained. Subject 17B, stability uncertain, reactive to emotional cues, memory suppression incomplete, do not expose to unfamiliar males during active phase. He looked at the girl again. Then, without fully knowing why, he reached out. His fingers brushed the chain that held her, and she moved, not just a stir, not a sleepy shuffle, but a fluid, sudden shift. Her hand gripped his wrist. Her eyes snapped. Open. Amethyst. Just like the report said. But the look in them wasn't feral. It was desperate. Then she growled, soft, almost unsure, but not with malice, more like fear. Easy, he said, raising his hands. Not here to hurt you. She blinked. Her grip tightened. And then slowly she sat up. The chain groaned. All right, he muttered. Let's get you out of here. He didn't know why he said it. He didn't even know if she understood. But she let go and let him break the locks. Naren should have left her in the med bay. He should have dumped her on a refugee planet or passed her off to a medical cruiser. But instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor of his ship, staring at him like he was gravity itself, watching every movement, every breath. When he handed her food, she took it delicately and studied it for a long time before eating. Not like an animal, not like someone who'd never tasted real food, but like someone suspicious of anything that wasn't in a test tube. He tried talking to her. What were they doing to you in there? No answer. You remember your name? Still nothing. You're Cella, right? That's what the file said. At that, her head tilted slightly. She blinked once, then twice, and then she reached out and tapped his chest. Naren, he said. She tapped his chest again, harder, then pointed to herself. He blinked. You want me to say your name? She nodded once. Cella. A soft sound left her lips, not quite speech, but a pleased hum, low in her throat. He wasn't sure what that meant, but the way her ears twitched and her tail swayed slowly behind her made him think it meant she liked hearing it. The next few days passed in silence and routine. She followed him like a shadow, not close enough to crowd him, but never more than 2 steps behind. When he slept, she curled near the vent beside the engine room, warm, quiet, and always alert. When he checked systems or traded with locals at the remote outposts, she stayed in the cargo bay, never touching anything, but always waiting for him to return. And every time he came back, she was right there at the ramp, as if she expected he might never come back at all. Do you think I'm gonna ditch you? He asked once. She didn't answer, but she reached for his hand, not to hold it, just to touch it. Brief, soft, reassuring. That single touch left his chest hollow and full. At the same time, one night, he couldn't sleep. He stood at the edge of the ship's lower level, watching the stars flick past the viewing window. His thoughts were a tangle of questions. Who she was, what they'd done to her, why she didn't speak, why she wouldn't leave him, but mostly why he didn't want her to leave either. Cella appeared beside him, silent, her white hair messy, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He didn't speak, she didn't either, but she leaned her head gently against his shoulder, and this time, he didn't pull away. They stood like that for a long while. Things changed on the 6th day. Naren had taken a job to deliver parts to a fringe mechanic colony. Easy credits, no questions. He left Cella on board as usual and went to complete the drop. He was gone less than 30 minutes. When he came back, the ramp was open. The bay was empty. He ran through every corridor, calling her name, though she'd never once responded aloud. The panic in his voice surprised him. It was raw, too real. He found her outside the ship, crouched in the loading dock's shadows, surrounded by 3 armed locals. They weren't touching her, but they were close, and Cella was crouched, growling. Her ears were flat, her eyes wild, her claws bared. The men were laughing. Easy, beastie, one said, prodding her tail with a boot. What, your master leave you alone? That was it. Naren stepped between them before he could think. Back off. The nearest man turned. What's it to you? She's mine, Naren said. Cella froze. Then, slowly, she rose and moved behind him like she had on the first day. The men chuckled, muttered something crude, and walked off. Naren turned. You okay? She stared at him. Then suddenly she stepped closer and hugged him, full arms around his middle, face pressed into his chest, her entire body trembling. He didn't know what to do. So he wrapped his arms around her, tentative at first, then firmer, as she melted against him, like it was the only safe place left in the universe. That night, She curled up at the foot of his bed. He tried to tell her she didn't have to, that she could sleep in the warm storage cabin with the softer bedding. She didn't move. He gave up. When he lay down, she shifted. One pawed hand touched his blanket, then his arm. Then she slid closer, her head against his ribs. He didn't sleep for hours, not because he was uncomfortable, but because he didn't want the moment to end. The next morning, he found her sketching. She'd pulled up a datapad from the nav console and was using a stylus to draw dot lines, loops, spirals. But they weren't random. They were maps, star charts, the area around, the lab where she'd been held. She handed him the pad. He stared at it, then stared at her. "You remember?" he said softly. "You know where they kept you." She nodded once, then tapped a single blinking red point on the map. His chest tightened. "You want to go back?" Another nod. "Why?" She didn't answer in words. She just tapped the corner of the screen, and there, in faint white light, was a number, 18 on the subject. Someone else still trapped. He stared at her. And saw something new. She wasn't just a rescued girl. She wasn't just bonded to him. She had purpose, fire, loyalty. And suddenly, the idea of letting her go, of losing her, felt unbearable. "Cella," he said, touching her shoulder. She turned to him. "I'll help you." Her eyes welled, though she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned forward and gently nuzzled his jaw. A soft, warm gesture of thanks. And maybe something more. Something wild. Something tender. Something just beginning. The ancient moon of Thvora had no recorded atmosphere, no known sentient life, and no strategic value. Loon should have never crash-landed here. His survey shuttle had been surveying the star cluster for archaic ruins, cataloging dead languages, lost texts, anything of cultural significance. But the pulse storm came out of nowhere. One minute he was translating a pre-fall glyph series, and the next his systems blinked into static, and his craft spiraled into this forgotten, overgrown orb. When he woke, his ribs ached, and his translator implant buzzed like an angry insect behind his ear. The moon should have been barren, just another carved-out exo-rock. But as he crawled from the shattered hull, he realized that was wrong. So very wrong. There were trees here, not the metallic synthwoods of colonized planets or the domed microheb flora. These were ancient things, twisted, silver-barked, growing in curved shapes like bones arching toward the sky. Vines hummed with faint electrical pulses, and the sky shimmered like a living opal. And far off, through the fog mist and light-cracked air, he saw her. At first, Loon thought she was a hallucination. She stood poised on a jutting cliff just beyond the clearing, barefoot on the stone, with wild white hair cascading down her back. A cloak of dusky feathers wrapped around her shoulders, and behind her, a long wolfish tail twitched in warning. Her skin wasn't human, not quite, pale with streaks of silver fur and bioluminescent tattoos that pulsed faintly when she moved. Her eyes glowed gold and violet at once. He didn't speak, neither did she. And then, with a soundless step, she vanished into the forest. For 3 days, Loon struggled to repair the calm ray. The forest gave little in the way of food, though there were strange pods that seemed edible and water that tasted of salt and ash. Each night, he heard things beyond the trees, whispers in languages he didn't understand, footsteps that stopped when he turned, howls not bestial, but mournful, threading through the fog. On the 4th day, she returned, only this time, she didn't vanish. She stood at the edge of the trees and tilted her head. Her arms were bare now, showing etched symbols down her forearms. She said a single word, low and guttural, and then waited. Luen carefully spoke back. "I don't understand." She narrowed her eyes. He tapped his ear, translators broken. She repeated the word, this time slower. And he recognized it. Not the meaning, but the structure. It matched a proto-root he'd studied from an extinct tribe in the northern Othel belts. Loon sat down slowly, and without moving closer, he began to mimic the word back to her, matching tone, cadence, shape. Her lips twitched, the tiniest smirk. Then, she turned and walked away, leaving behind a single word scratched into the dirt, "Stay at night." She came again. This time, she brought him a piece of glowing fruit. He bit it without asking questions. Either it would kill him or it wouldn't, but he was starving. And she watched him with an expression halfway between amusement and challenge. He pointed to himself. Loon. She looked skeptical. Luen. He repeated, syllables clear. She watched his lips, then pointed at her own chest. Arven. The name echoed like a wind through old stone. Arven. Their lessons continued. Each night she returned. She taught him words scratched in soil and traced in the air. He taught her symbols from his own language in return. The exchange was awkward at first, but slowly trust formed, woven through repetition and effort. But it was never easy. Arven was distant, not cold, but watchful, like a predator who didn't know if you were prey or ally. One night, as they sat beside the broken shuttle and Loon explained the human word for forest, she said something new. In her own language, she told him, your kind bring fire and iron. He paused. What? She repeated it, then added, you are not wanted here. His heart dropped. I didn't come to invade. I didn't even mean to land here. Arven stared at the stars. Your people never mean to, but they come and take. Loon wanted to protest, defend humanity, but he saw something in her gaze, a memory, pain. So he didn't argue. Instead, he said quietly, I won't take anything from you. She didn't reply, but that night she stayed longer than usual. On the 12th day, he asked, why do you keep coming back? Arven traced a claw across the stone, not looking at him. Then I swore I would never speak to a human again. He blinked. Why? She looked at him finally, eyes sharp as blades. Because the last one I trusted broke the moon. Loon's breath caught. This moon. She nodded. He came as you did, alone. He said he wanted to learn. He said we were beautiful. Loon said nothing. Arven's voice hardened. Then he called his ship, his crew. They stole our temples, burned our trees, took my sister. She stood, the feathers of her cloak rustling. I cursed them all. I said I would never love a human, never touch one again, never even speak their name. She turned away. But here I am. Loon approached slowly, gently. I'm not him. I know. I didn't come here to take. I know. He paused, then whispered, then why do you keep running? Arven turned, eyes gleaming. Because when I look at you, I want to break my vow. They didn't kiss that night. But when she left, she touched his fingers with hers, and for her, that meant more than lips ever could. The calm ray came online. 2 days later, Loon stared at the blinking blue signal for a long time. One message, and a rescue crew would arrive within 20 hours. But he didn't press send. Instead, he went to the forest. He found her beneath the silver bark tree, sitting with her tail curled around her legs, watching the mist shift. You fixed it, she said. Yes. You'll leave. He nodded. I could. She waited. But I haven't sent the call yet. Arven looked at him, her face unreadable. Why not? He knelt beside her. Because I'm not done learning your language. She blinked. And because I'd rather stay here. With you. She stared at him for a long moment, then leaned forward and kissed him. Slow, careful, not with the hunger of instinct, but with the weight of a vow being undone, a curse breaking. She whispered, barely audible, I still hate your kind. He smiled. That's okay. You don't have to love my kind. He touched her cheek. Just me. They never called the ship. Instead, they built a shelter from shuttle parts and forest. Vines. They wrote their own language on the walls. They shared food, dreams, fears, and one night, Arven pressed her forehead to Loon's and whispered, I think I broke something inside me. What do you mean? He asked. I think it was the part that kept me alone. The wreck drifted just beyond the moon's shadow, a colossal spine of broken metal and fractured bulkheads, the remains of a once glorious battleship known in old reports as the Oryx Vale. Tail floated toward it in his Eva rig, magnet boots gripping, hull plating, hands trembling as he traced the entry wound carved by an antimatter blast. Salvagers didn't come this far out into no broadcast zones unless they were desperate. And Tail was very desperate. Credits had dried up after the Crimson Loop Syndicate flagged his last contract as incomplete. His ship, the Glimmerot, was running on fumes and memory. But a battleship, even a ghost one, that was gold. He cut through the external port, Inside, the ship was silent, dead silent. No AI whispers, no emergency lights, no sound but his own breath. His helmet visor flickered with residual M readings, but nothing active. The oxygen was gone. Life support long failed. The only motion came from drifting ash and shattered glass. Until he found her. She was chained in the armory vault. Naked from the waist up. Her skin was covered in what looked like metallic veins, ribbons of black wire crawling from a collar at her throat, burrowing under skin that shimmered between gray and furred white. Her limbs were scarred, muscles tense even in unconsciousness. Tail nearly dropped his light. She wasn't human. Not even close. Clawed feet, elongated limbs, ears sharp and wolf-shaped. A long tail twitched once reflexively. Her breathing was ragged, like she hadn't exhaled in years. A holographic tag above her flickered back to life as his proximity ID pinged it. Text scrolled in a forgotten dialect. Tail ran the translation algorithm. Specimen 014, Riven, phase-locked warform. Collar engaged, do not touch. His heart stuttered. He knew about warforms. Everyone did. Bioengineered alien hybrids bred for violence and programmed into permanent combat states. Through neural war collars, they were deployed at the height of the Orion sieges. But when peace came, most were purged. Apparently not all. He should have left right then, marked her location, extracted valuables, and never spoken a word of it. But instead, he stepped forward. Closer. Her eyes snapped open. Not slowly, not like a waking person, but violently, as if shocked awake. They glowed. Deep red. Her whole body tensed against the chains, muscles bulging, claws scraping the vault wall. Her snarl cracked through the comms, a sound so primal it bypassed language. Tail backed away. Easy. Hey, I'm not military, just salvage crew, okay? She didn't answer, couldn't, maybe. Her collar pulsed, red lights. Spiked ends clamping tighter at the base of her skull. She shuddered in pain, growled louder. Every inch of her radiated rage, like she was seconds from tearing through her own bones to rip him apart. Then, without thinking, Tail reached out and touched the collar. The moment his gloved fingers met the surface, something shifted. The red glow faded. A flicker of blue ran through the collar's rim. Her body jerked, then stilled. Her breathing slowed. Her muscles slackened. Just slightly. The vault's ambient temperature rose by several degrees. Tail froze. His mind scrambled to recall the old warform protocols. Some collars were keyed to organic input, touch recognition, and override based not on authority, but empathy. One last failsafe built into monsters, too powerful to control. He watched her slump forward, not unconscious. Calmer. Her eyes faded from red to a dusky amber. And when she looked at him this time, there was confusion, not hate. He returned later with oxygen tanks and a medkit. She hadn't moved. He hadn't expected her to still be there, truthfully. But there she was, seated now. Chains loose, but not broken. She watched him warily, an animal, once caged and still unsure if the bars were really gone. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. She didn't reply, but when he offered her water, she drank. When he patched a cracked ligament in her leg, she didn't flinch. When he knelt beside her and asked, "Do you have a name?" she finally spoke, voice hoarse, underused. Riven. Over the next cycle, Tail turned the Glimrod into something it had never been, a safe place. He scavenged the armory for spare rations, sealed the vault, and created a soft sleep nest in the cargo bay. He couldn't unkind her fully, not without knowing if the collar would relapse, but he loosened the cuffs, cleaned her wounds, brought light into places long left dark. Riven said little, but she followed him with her eyes. A silent sentinel, a ghost waking from war. She learned his name after 2 nights, spoke it quietly, like tasting a new flavor. Double quotes TAEL. And he smiled every time she said it. He discovered her scars by accident. Not the physical ones, those were obvious, but the ones deeper, mental, emotional. He'd tried to let her listen to music, played a slow, melancholic tune over the ship's audio system. She shrieked, collapsed, covered her ears, rocked back and forth in panic. He killed the sound in an instant, then crouched beside her. She was trembling, jaw clenched tight enough to crack bone. No more noise, he whispered. I promise later, she told him haltingly that music was used to trigger war mode. Each note a code. A command. No sound is safe until. He hummed a soft, off-key human lullaby. And she listened. Her transformation wasn't sudden. It was subtle. A small smile when he handed her fruit instead of protein packs. The way she tried mimicking his posture when he sat. One night, she brushed her clawed hand against his sleeve, testing the texture of his coat, then whispered, "I don't remember soft things." He nodded. "Then I'll remind you." They shared stories, mostly through drawing. She etched her memories into the cargo wall's crude sketches of forest planets, moons with twin suns, wolf-like shapes dancing in Hunt's circle. He shared old photos from a cracked data ship, a younger tale, a sister long lost, the scrapyard he grew up in. She stared at the image of a young girl hugging him in the dust. "She loved you, yeah," he said. "She still does, somewhere. I don't remember love." Tale met her gaze. "You will." The collar remained. It wasn't just a device. It was her fear, her prison, her past. One night, he asked, "Do you want me to take it off?" She hesitated. "I don't know what I'll become. I do." He said softly, "You'll still be Riven." She shook her head. "You don't know what's inside." "I do." He whispered. And reached forward. Hands trembling, he pressed his palm to the collar. Let the contact linger. The embedded lights flared again, but this time, they turned a soft violet. A hum vibrated through her skin. The spikes withdrew. There was a click, a snap of release. The collar fell away. Riven flinched as it hit the floor. But then, she didn't transform. She just stood there. Free. Untouched. A girl with glowing amber eyes and a quivering lip. Tail didn't speak. He just opened his arms, and she stepped into them, shaking, breathing, real. They didn't run. They didn't have to. No one came looking. No one knew she was still alive. They left the Oryx Veil behind and floated to the drift zones where no syndicates ruled, and no corporations cared. And on the edge of a dying star's gravity well, they lived. They scavenged. They traded. They healed. And some nights, Tail would wake to find Riven curled against him, her tail wrapped around them both like a shield. "I feel soft," she'd murmur. He'd smile and kiss her forehead. "That's because you are."